Hello, everyone. Thank you for your patience. I appreciate it so very much. We have today Judy Landess, who is one of our fellow CASAs, and she is going to talk to us about what CASAs can do in educational advocacy. And this is definitely a specialty of hers as she is a school psychologist. So this is her realm of things that she is working on. Judy?
Yes. All right. Hi, everyone. I will pause a couple times just to get any questions you guys might have. That if we have time for at the end, I can answer for you. But at the end, I also have my email address available. Please feel free to email me if you guys come across a situation where you just want a little bit more help or more information. I'm happy to help out however I can. So today we're going to talk about just like that initial step with that educational advocacy, and that's just connecting with the school to begin with. And a lot of times our kids do end up moving, or, like with their foster parent, they might move from one place to another. They enroll in a new school district, all of that. So it's kind of like starting over every time. So just being able to connect with the school so that you can support them in that way and just be another contact for the school in the event that they have a concern or they want to share something really positive is always good. So to start off, I just wanted to share one of my favorite quotes that I'm a big quote person. So this is like one that I always like live by. I'm sure you guys have heard it before, but Rita Pearson does a TED Talk, and this is one of the key things that she says is every child deserves a champion. And it's part of the reason why I became a school psychologist. I wanted to be able to support kids in the school system and ensure that they were getting the supports that they need. And it's another reason why I decided to become a CASA too, because I kind of made some life changes and wanted to still support at-risk youth. So it's just something that's really important to me. And I know that's something that you guys can probably all relate to as well. Okay, so a little bit about myself. This is what I look like with a professional photographer. But I'm a school psychologist for nearly 10 years. I started off working in the elementary setting, K through 6, specifically supporting the autism programming. And then the last for about 5 years, I worked at the high school here in Crystal Lake. I supported the alternative high school. It's called Tabor Oaks, from which supported 9th through 12th grade students. So that was like a lot of kids that had a lot of significant trauma. Some kids had multiple disabilities like autism and had grown up with a lot of trauma, or like, being adopted, having to go through the foster care system, all of that. I did end up leaving the school setting about a year ago, and now I'm an independent contractor for school districts and support them that way. I also have a private practice in McHenry called EduPsych, so I help out families as well. So just kind of helping people on both sides of the table. I've been a CASA since last year. I have 2 cases. Total, it's 5 kids, but they're all wonderful. They're all kind of within this age group as well, so elementary through middle school. And my family and I moved to Crystal Lake in 2018. We have 2 kids and 3 dogs. And yeah, that's just kind of me in a nutshell. So again, if you guys have any questions about, the school, or if you feel like there's something that the school could be supporting your kids with, please let me know. I have so much experience working with staff, and I'm very familiar with all of that. So I'm so happy to, help you guys out. So starting off, what is a CASA's role in their child's education? So the first thing is just to communicate with school staff that are relevant to your child's team. So if they have an IEP, this would include like their case manager or any related service providers like the social worker, speech pathologist, occupational therapist, behavior specialist, all of that. And an IEP is an individual education plan or individual education program, depending on what the district calls it. Kids that qualify for special education services will have this. So it'll support them with different services in school, as well as specialized instruction to help them close any academic gaps that they might have. Additionally, it allows you to connect with someone so you can review your child's educational information and data. So this would include like their grades, their attendance, discipline history, If they have a 504 plan, which is for accommodations, you'll be able to see that too, as well as their IEP. So you can see what they're eligible for, what goals do they have, how much progress have they made, who's all in their team, all of these really important things so that you can know how your student is being supported and how often they're being supported. Other ways that you can support is attending educational meetings. It's not super necessary, but sometimes parents, especially when they're, not knowing exactly how to navigate this on their own, or they just want someone else that can help advocate for their child or be like the child's voice, it's really helpful to attend. Attending at least one will just give you an idea of what is discussed in these meetings, and then also for you to be able to see the dynamic of the school team and see just kind of how they operate, how they kind of come together to support the child, and who is the expert in each area to support your CASA kids. Additionally, you can just check in to get information for your court reports. That's something that I'll do is I'll check in with my contact once a semester. And then what they do is serve as kind of like the liaison between me and the school. So they'll get emails from like the general education teacher, case manager, whoever, and then they just email me what those, they'll just forward those emails to me. And that's really helpful to add to your court reports. But you want to see if, how they're making progress, how they're transitioning, if there's any concerns with behavior, if there's any challenges that the student is facing that may require additional support. And this is really important when we talk about outside supports, and that's called wraparound services. So they're getting supports at school, but then they're getting supports outside of school, which helps really build those skills or really help them work through whatever challenges they're currently facing. So just having that access to or that connection can help put extra eyes on your child, because we only see them, twice a month minimum, but at least you get another perspective of how they're doing in a setting that is a little bit more structured, but a little bit more busy too, right? Because there's a lot more kids there. Before I go into much more, I just want to see if anyone had any specific questions that they currently have about educational advocacy. And if you just want to put them in that chat, and then I can review them at the end. But if you have any questions that kind of come up in the meantime or throughout the presentation, just add them there, and then we can kind of go over them. I tend to forget things a lot, so having somewhere to write something or put it in is always helpful for me. So communicating with the school staff, social worker is always the best place to start. They are the whole purpose of the social worker is to connect the kids and the families to community resources. And they're going to want to know, if a student is connected with the CASA or is court involved in any way. So the social worker is essentially responsible for the social emotional functioning and well-being of students in their buildings. And this includes anything that can impact their education. So this is environmental factors, including life history, socioeconomic status. So our kids just in general, because they are placed in foster care for whatever reason, do qualify for having environmental and socioeconomic factors that have impacted them. So like I said, the social worker, they would want to know when a student is connected with the CASA, since they're already at risk for those social emotional challenges, and that can absolutely impact their education and how they're accessing that. The social worker is going to be your segue to connect with other staff, so including that general education teacher, any related service personnel like the speech therapist, occupational therapist, behavior specialist, school psych, and any other special education staff. So that's why I recommend just connecting with the social worker and just having them be your liaison, because once you get everybody's emails and contacts, it's kind of a lot, right? And so just having that one point person is great, and it just really makes things a lot more streamlined and a lot easier. And sometimes people will have updates and sometimes they don't, and it's fine. It's not, it's just whatever information you can gather. Social workers, they also assist with connecting families to community resources. So I know that we all connect the families with things, and whenever we get the emails from our supervisors about community stuff, we forward them on and we share them. But social workers can also assist with finding, therapists that have a sliding scale, or accept certain insurances or whatnot. So they have a little bit more information about who has availability, right? For one, and two, just how to access those and provide that support right away. And they also work with a lot of these outside providers to actually come to the school and provide services for the child in school, which is great because if you're one of my foster parents has, more than one child, taking them from place to place after school can be a lot. So they will partner with the community resources to come and provide those services at school. Additionally, I do have resources linked at the end of the slide. I did share the slide deck, like a PDF version with Sherry that has clickable links that you guys can access. Two of those to help just kind of facilitate that connection is a all about me worksheet that you can fill out with your child just to help them identify different characteristics or facts about themselves that will help them with like that social communication. A lot of times, kids are starting in a new environment or new school, new class, and they don't really know how to engage in those conversations, or they might be a little bit shy, but doing those about me worksheets can really help them identify like what are some of their favorite things. Because when people ask them, like, what's your favorite color? What's your favorite food? On the spot, it can be hard to think of, especially when you're a kid that has been transitioning so much in their life already. It's kind of at the forefront. So that's something that I did with my CASA kids, and it was great. They transitioned into a new school this year, and they found it very helpful. The other resource that I have for you guys is a document called To My Child's Educator, and that would be for the foster parent or the natural parent that they can fill out and send to their children's school team just to learn a little bit more about what helps their child, like, their child, whether they're an intact family or not, but just like different strategies and stuff that could help them, just like you would if it was your kid, right? Like I always joke that my daughter's like Lisa Simpson and my son's like Bart. So whenever my kids start school, I'm like emailing the teachers and letting them know, like, I know Isla was like rule follower, but this is a different ballgame and this is how you can support him. So it's the same thing. Just having those little tips would be very, very helpful for a teacher that has like 20 kids, right? For that educational information and data. So you get all of that and like, what do you do with it, right? So teacher reports oftentimes will include classroom functioning. And what this is like, how is the kid meeting the daily expectations? Like, are they following the routines? Like, are they getting along with peers? Are they doing what they're supposed to do when they go into groups? Do they have their materials? Are they often forgetful? It's just those little things that we kind of overlook sometimes, or that they're so rote, right? But for kids and just what we know about what trauma does to the brain, it can be really hard to complete multitask steps or directions. So just getting an idea from the teacher, like how the student is just meeting those daily demands of the classroom environment is really important because we want to make sure that they are, being safe, that they feel safe, that they're being responsible, that they're being respectful, following routines, and also looking at like their mood and appearance, right? Like, are they coming in happy? Are they excited? Do they seem sad? Do you know, when they come in, does their mood dictate the day for them, right? Like some kids will come in and they're upset and, it's going to be a really hard day for them. Some kids come in happy and, you don't know that something might be bothering them or whatnot. So it's just really good to kind of gauge like the teacher's observations of those students. Also, like, are they dressed appropriately? Like, with those basic needs again. Do they look disheveled? Are they clean? Things like that we don't always get to see, but the teacher sees them every day. Is just helpful information. The other thing too is that's really important is not just concerns but celebrations, right? Like just sharing like how, like what's something great that this student did this week, or did they earn some type of prize or something at school? Like a lot of schools do positive behavior intervention supports and kids can earn like fake money or something and they use it to buy things at the store. So just getting updates from the teacher about how like that student is like, are they earning just as much as their peers? Are they earning less? Are they earning more? And, it's like those little things that help us know that they do feel safe and comfortable at school. And it is something that's important to them. And a lot of times the routine and structure is great. So we just want to make sure it's fitting and working for them. Participation in tiered interventions. So in Illinois, before a student can be qualified for special education services, they have to go through what's called a response to intervention or multi-tiered systems of support, which would be a whole nother presentation, and we can totally do that. But what it is just tiered supports for whatever they need. So typically, tier 1 is just gen ed. Tier 2 would be a little bit more, so like a pull-out group, maybe like once or twice a week, just focusing on that specific skill, like if it's reading or math. Tier 3 would be like the most intensive, like so pulling every single day, working on something for at least 20 to 30 minutes, really, really honing in on those skills. And if the student's still not making progress, then they eventually refer for special education services. So if you have a child that is participating in tiered intervention supports, you want to know that. And you want to know where they are. And why that's important is because if they were to move to a different school, for the new school to know that they've been receiving those supports is really important, so that the kid's not struggling in gen ed for however long, and then maybe shutting down because things are too hard. It just provides a lot of information so that they can, support the student right away. So you want to know, what supports are they receiving? If they are participating in tiered intervention supports, are they making progress? Are they responding to those interventions? Are they working? Just to kind of keep track of all of that stuff. And usually it's not anything super intimidating. So I know that all of this kind of like jargon might be a little bit intimidating, but really it's just, yes, we're pulling them for these services, and we saw that their grades went up, or like their scores on their little tests, their benchmark assessments went up, whatever percentage. So it's very, very easy to tell whether it's working or not. If they have a 504 plan, those are just accommodations, and essentially a 504 plan levels the playing field for them, right? So it just creates accommodations to make the work environment, or like the school environment, more accessible, so that they can equally participate in accessing their education as their peers. So what you want to know is how often are they using their accommodations? Is the student advocating to use their accommodations? Because the other thing we want to help is foster independence. So if they know that it works for them, are they aware of that, and do they know how to ask for it? Some things we for sure can close the gap, like skills, like math skills, reading skills, but things that kids have, like ADHD, that's like an executive functioning disorder, that's going to be their whole life, right? So we want to teach them from when they're little how to be independent and how to access or know what works for them. And as adults, we do that stuff all the time, like writing ourselves notes, like using Siri to remind us of tasks, or setting alarm clocks. These are things that we do every day. We want kids to know what works for them too, and teaching them when they're young is perfect. So just knowing which accommodations are working, are they advocating for those accommodations themselves, is really helpful, because those are things that they can apply to other areas of their life too. So even at home, how are the accommodations being provided? Which ones seem to be helping the most? Which one's the least? Sometimes when a kid initially gets a 504, they kind of throw the kitchen sink at it. So they'll say okay, you have ADHD. We're just going to give you everything we normally give a kid with ADHD. And it's not always appropriate, right? So that's the whole point of services and supports, is that it has to be appropriate for them. So finding out which ones are super helpful and which ones can we just take off, because otherwise, if they move to a different school, they're going to be giving them everything and the kid doesn't necessarily need it at all. Same thing with IEPs. That'll help you get a history. How long has the student required special education services? What are they eligible in? How are they responding to that instruction? And are they making progress on their goals? And all of these are important, because when it comes to attending, if you were to attend a meeting, if the child is old enough, they typically are invited to attend, but they don't always go. But again, we're there to be the child's voice, right? So just like with our reports in the courtroom, we could do that in meetings and say, hey, I spoke to Billy and he says that this, and this is not helpful, but this, and this is. Is there a way that we can add this instead and remove whatever? Or, my understanding is that he's been receiving this service for this long, for 8 weeks, and nothing's changing. How do we change that intervention to really target what's going on here? Or does more testing have to be done? So just knowing what areas the student is still struggling in will help you to ask the questions to that team and better understand how to support the student at school, so it's a place that they do enjoy going to. So CASAs in educational meetings, again, so these are really great opportunities for you guys just to go and kind of see how the child is in a different environment. So for kids in foster care, control can be something that is very like triggering or very difficult for them because they lack that, right? So being their voice when it comes to education is a great way to help them gain some control to a big part of their life when they're not able to communicate or advocate themselves. So meeting with them beforehand, before any of these meetings, just to see what they would like their teacher to know, what is helping them, if there's any issues with peers, do they feel safe at school? Do they enjoy going to school? Those are really important things that the team would want to know. So additionally, like I said, children that are 14 and a half and older, they're invited to go to their special education meetings. It's highly recommended. So if you have a kiddo that's a little bit older and doesn't want to go, like, talking them into going and say, I'll go with you too, might be helpful because again, you want to have a seat at the table when they're talking about your education, right? So just teaching them again, like how to advocate, how to be present, all of those things are really important. And if they don't want to go, that's totally fine. Like it's not like a huge thing, but we typically want them to have a voice in decisions being made about them. But if they don't go, you can attend on their behalf and help be their voice, which is, super important. And the teams would appreciate that as well. Really quickly, so just some of the things that I have on here for like seeing like the child's work, where they sit and by who is like, great like little things to see for parent teacher conferences. But special education, there's IEP meetings, there's evaluations, like initial evaluations and then reevaluations. The reevaluations happen every 3 years. But sometimes there's check-ins. And then at the bottom, I wrote manifestation determination reviews. And I just wanted to include that because those are done when the child does something super significant and they're like suspended from school. And then the team has to determine if that behavior was because of their disability or not. So having someone there that can advocate for the child and speak about like their history and what they know in the context that is appropriate, right, is really important to help the child not get like, they're not necessarily expelled from school, although that could happen, but that they're getting the appropriate supports and that that the team has all of the information necessary to make the most appropriate decision on how to move forward with that child. If you have any questions about that, please let me know. Court reports. So what you can include from all of the information that you would get could just be overall performance in school, the students, like how are they doing as far as like, are they enjoying school? Is there any academic deficits or lack of progress? Are there any behavioral or social emotional concerns? Any attendance issues? How are they adjusting? How involved is the foster parent or natural parent? And that's really important too, because you want to know that the foster parent and the natural parent are being responsive. So if the school's reaching out to them and saying, hey, this is happening, or hey, they did a great job, that the parent is showing interest in their child and they are responding and they are, doing what they're supposed to be doing, helping the kid with their homework if they need it, all of that. So getting that perspective from the school is really great, and including that in the court reports is really important as well. And then your scope of responsibility as a CASA, right? So we don't want to step on anybody's toes. Like everybody's an expert at the table, based in their area. So as far as what is the CASA responsible for, I would say that the most important things are knowing your child's rights. So access to a free public education and also access to a free and appropriate public education. So a free public education is for everybody. A free and appropriate public education is for those kids that need the extra support. So I do have links again at the end of the presentation in the PDF version where you can see through the Department of Education what that looks like and what that means. And then the other thing is once you feel, because no one's expecting a CASA to be an expert in education. So once you feel like, okay, this doesn't seem right to me, I think I need a little bit more support, connecting with an advocacy agency or an advocacy resource that specializes in that is always a great next step. So Options in Advocacy of McHenry County is a great one. They offer free advocacy services for families. So that might be a good place to reach out. And again, you can reach out to me if you have any specific questions, and I'm happy to consult and kind of walk through that with you. So that's the end of our presentation today. And then these are just the resources that I have linked that you guys can check out from the PDF version that Sherry will post on the website. Okay, I think I saw one question pop up. Sherry, do you want me to stop sharing the screen?
That's fine. That's fine. So the question is, do you have any suggestions about how to help a child who's in the school setting while they're in care, but everybody else has a mom and dad?
Oh, so just kind of talking to them about their specific situation.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah. So I think that's something that, so we actually talked about that a lot. So when I was in a smaller elementary school setting, and I did work in elementary last year too, I was contracting with the school district. One of the things that the school did a really great job talking about was how everybody's family looks different. And at that point, it kind of opens up people to talking about like, oh yeah, like I actually live with my grandma and grandpa, or like, I have two moms or whatever. So then they kind of realize that everybody has different families, or that their families are huge, right? So like I live with my mom and dad, but my aunt always also lives with us and she takes care of me too. So one of the things that you can do is just talk about how diverse families are, and that sometimes, I don't know how old the child, oh, you said a young child. So a lot of times too, young children might talk to one person and think that it means everybody. So just keeping that in mind, that sometimes like they generalize like really easily, like, oh, everybody else has a mom and dad except for me. But really it's like, okay, but you only spoke to one person and that's probably the report, but that's not true. There are so many people with different types of families. So I think there's actually a couple of books I can send. I'll send to Sherry. Can I send them to you? Just like book titles? Yes. Okay. And then depending on how young, I'll like throw like a mix of age groups. Then that way one of them might be helpful that you can read with them, and then just kind of talk about how families all look very different.
Excellent.
I think it was me who posted it. I'm looking for first grade. And what I found out is she's having temper tantrums now. And her therapist thinks it's because of the fact that she's back in the school setting and she's around kids who are, have the mom and dad, and she doesn't. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is she having temper tantrums at home or at school?
I think she's probably having them at both. I'm not 100% sure though.
Yeah.
I know her behavior at home is different.
Yeah. So a lot of times especially in schools, it's always that behavior is a method of communication. So it really depends on like what is happening right before she has these tantrums and what might be happening like afterwards. And sometimes too, being a child therapist is really hard because kids aren't always able to kind of communicate how they're feeling. So it could be that the therapist was trying to just give different options of what could be bothering her. But if she's having a tantrum, that means that she can't communicate what she needs or what she wants. So it might be really hard for her to actually communicate that later too when she's calm, right? So if she is having tantrums at school, for sure reach out to the social worker and just find out like how often is this happening, and then at what point do you guys have someone come in and observe just to see what's kind of going on and how she can be supported. Because there's what's called a functional behavior assessment, and what that is that it's a behavior plan that looks at what's kind of happening right before the behavior, what happens right after the behavior. And then they just find out what the function of that behavior is. And it's essentially a plan for everybody else around that child to be able to change the environment, change the instruction, or approach the child in a way that is helpful for them. And in the meantime, they can get support with the social worker on how to appropriately communicate what they're feeling. And sometimes like kids, especially that young, they don't really have a lot of feeling words. So it could be that it's building up throughout the day, and then she's just like exhausted. So then she just like lets it out. Or it could be that that's just how she's learned how to get what she wants immediately. Are these similar resources available for kids who are being homeschooled? So kids that are homeschooled is a little bit different. So if a child is homeschooled and they have a disability, they would have to go to public school, because one of the things that is considered a factor is appropriate access to education. So if someone is homeschooled, the school doesn't know how the child is being taught. Like, are they meeting, expectations for education? So then the school would want them to be in there for about 6 weeks so they can kind of get an idea of how the student performs academically before doing any assessment. And if it is, it's called lack of appropriate access to instruction. So if it's found that the child hasn't had appropriate access to instruction, then they would need to try to do some tiered interventions first. So this actually happened. So like what kind of case, the children were homeschooled, but mom's level of education was only so far. So that was like the first step. That was like, okay, like we need to get these kids in school because they're like learning things that like you don't know, right? So like that was like the limitation of mom. So so that's what we did. We got them connected to school. But that's essentially what they would do. So they do absolutely have access to these supports and these resources, but they just have to get them from the school setting. So that would be the first step.
Right. So I have a question. I thought I heard you say something about an IEP and a 504. Is it an and or an or situation?
No, you could have an IEP and a 504. And very rarely does that happen. It's usually like if the kid has say they have like a specific learning disability, but they also have asthma and they need like a health thing or something. So the 504 is usually going to address that, because on the court, because every IEP or 504 has like a case manager attached to it. So the case manager, if it's the nurse for someone that has asthma, would be the case manager for that 504. There's a student that I've worked with previously that has, he's completely deaf in one ear. So he has a 504 for that hearing support, but has an IEP for something completely different.
Okay. And when they do change schools, which you mentioned we do a lot, so the IEP is reevaluated every 3 years, but then when they change schools, is there anything to get that going in that new school, or how does that work?
Yeah, so when a child transfers to a new school, the parent fills out like a release of information, and then they check off that the student, they usually check off that the school can share everything. And then the school will send over the IEP and all that information. So the new school will have it. Sometimes whether the IEP is adaptable is a different thing, because there are best practices in writing IEPs. Unfortunately, not everybody writes very great IEPs, and that's okay. But essentially, like what should be done is that an IEP can be taken from one place to another and anybody can implement it. Sometimes like one school will put a specific program in there, but the other school doesn't have it. So they have to try to find something that's similar that they could do with the child. So IEPs typically transfer no problem. It just depends on how good the IEP is. If the new team feels that the current IEP isn't enough to support the child, then they'll probably open up domains, and which is the areas that they assess, to do more testing to see how to better support the student. But they do like to give them a little bit of that transition time too, because they know that can cause like behavior issues, or that can it just depends how it impacts the student. But the tiered intervention services, though, are not as tracked, because that's not like a legal, like federal thing. That's like a state by state thing. Some states don't even do tiered intervention services. So that's why that would be really important to know. So then that way, when they do transfer to a different school, or if they transfer to a different school, you can let them know like, hey, they're receiving tier 2 or tier 3 interventions for math and reading. They were working on XYZ. And then that way they know. But that's something that for sure gets lost in the shuffle. Like they don't send over that data consistently.
Great. Other people want to pop on with a question? You can write them too. It's okay.
And then in the resources too, I also linked a Google Doc that has like an email template. It's what I write whenever I introduce myself to the social worker. So you guys can copy and paste that. And then to find your child's social worker, just find out what school they're at. And usually on the school's website, you can just find the social worker listed on there. And if that person's not there anymore or at a different school, they'll refer you to the right person.
Very good. Well, I think our questions have been answered. So,
I have a
Judy,
quick
thank
one.
you. Oh, go ahead. We got one more.
So my child on their website, they have a psychologist social worker and they have a counselor social worker.
Okay.
Which one do I go to?
I would probably email both. Usually the psych, so I think what that might mean is that the psych supports like some social skill stuff, but just email them both. And then whoever wants to be the primary contact will do that for you. But yeah, usually school psychs aren't providing like related services for anybody, but in some cases they are. I mean, schools are very stretched thin right now with a lot of, like needing support for teachers and all of that. So I would just email them both.
Going once, going
I have
twice.
I have a quick.
Okay, go for it, Sai.
You referenced at the beginning of the presentation a TED Talk.
Yes.
What was it again?
So it was by Rita Pearson. I can send the link to that too. It's a really, really good one. If you haven't seen it, I really recommend everybody watch it. Well, let me look up the exact name of it. Every kid needs a champion.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Thank you, Judy. It is so good to hear all of these things. Those of us that are just starting our school year with our kiddos, this gives us a little foot in the door to think about the right things that we need to talk about. Appreciate you bringing all of these things to our attention. So thank you.